Alrighty, I know we've covered the digestion before, but I didn't have my computer system up last time. I didn't record it. And this time I've added a few things. So I gave you your little pass out. And I came across a questionnaire that y'all can just fill out on your own. You don't have to fill it out tonight. You can bring it back if you want to. Like any ideas for classes or anything you want to do. I'm being really drawn to get more active back into the energy work. I know a lot of stuff that we do on Sundays is mental work. Even though we usually incorporate stuff into working, we're still not. I want to get back into practicing more than anything. And I know Reiki's fun when we come and do that, but I want to get into like the energy development more. I've got kind of sidetracked from that. That's where I'm being drawn. So this Thursday, we're going to be doing some aura gazing, trying to play with seeing other people's auras. We'll be doing sensing and scanning energy, just playing with it, and playing with each other. Bless you. Playing with each other. You need Kleenex? Okay. And playing with each other's energy and God, Katie, and going from there. So, tongue-tied today. So today we're going to be covering digestion, and I want to bring my main thing that I'm trying to do right now is bridge what I'm mentally, emotionally sensing and feeling into seeing that physically completely. So tonight we've been doing the external, the muscles and things like that. We're going to start going internal, and we have a good example today. If Katie's willing to share. She texted me something earlier today that fits in perfectly with what we're doing today. So I took the time to actually make a sheet after I talked to her today. I didn't give y'all, but I'm going to show you if she's open to doing it. To help y'all see the correlation more, and there's lots to do with the time. The Chinese clock, we've mentioned, all these little factors we've mentioned can be put into a nice picture that hopefully we can do later with Katie. So that's if she's willing to do it. So let's see where I want to go. I want to cover a few things before that. I've been meaning to do this, but kind of get sidetracked. My goal and focus is to be in the present moment all the time. It doesn't mean that I'm living blissful in every moment, because to be in the moment, you're going to fluctuate. Sometimes there's an anger response, sometimes there's a sad, sometimes there's a fear. But you got to be in the moment to be, in my perception, to be really in your presence and in yourself. And just like this, most of y'all have seen this chart I've done before. It's like here's time, here's the past, here's the future, and it's like that fine line in the moment now, where you're not in the past, not in the future. That's where the I am resides. And you can see, in the middle of time, you see I am. So my goal is to be in that moment. And I've been distracting myself, I've found of late, from doing some of my own transformation, and it deals more with physical. Last year I did I took some time and did a real strict eating thing, I didn't do any carbs. But I was also avoiding doing some things that I was guided to as far as meditation and exercise and things like that. And that's usually how our life goes, right? We'll be focusing in one aspect and we kind of lose focus in the other. So I'm being really pushed to focus on bridging all this mental, emotional stuff. And I've gotten myself distracted a little bit, and I'm looking back to get focus back on that. And part of that is Thursdays we'll be practicing the energy work or practice or play, whatever you want to call it, and get us focused in that direction. So some of this next thing I want to share with pain. So if being in the now is ideal, when you're going with the flow, and the flow is you're emotional related to that moment, you're not living in past emotions, you're in that moment now. Pain is basically when you're not in the moment. You're resisting or you're holding old pain, old memories, old emotional patterns that equal physical pain. And Bambi had mentioned this before, and I liked it, is that the resistance, when we resist something, that's caused that contraction and the restriction, and that leads to pain. Because if everything's moving and you're in the now and you're flowing and going with whatever's happening, then sometimes you're going to have negative things happening, but you don't lose the flow, right? You don't wind up stuck mentally, emotionally, and even physically. So whenever there's a physical pain, my perception is that always leads back to some mental, emotional pattern. Okay? So mental emotional pattern that's lost being in the moment, it's in the past or it's in the future. In other words, worrying about the past or projecting into the future. When you're doing that, you're not flowing anymore. You got to be in the now to actually be flowing, going somewhere. So if you're not in the now, then you're resisting something. And we all have resistance. So to the degree that we're in the now is to the degree that we're flowing with life. And whenever we're avoiding things and not doing things for ourselves, we're resisting. So I've noticed some of my own resisting lately that I'm going to have to focus on. And a lot of it deals with, being more disciplined. That's why I made that post this past week in Facebook about discipline. I've been a little, less than disciplined in some areas of my life. I need to rein back in. And they're mainly around meditation, exercise, stuff like that. Things that I've let go. And those things do put you in line. They really do. Like I mentioned on that post on discipline, is that when you're being disciplined, hey Donna.
Hi.
When you're being disciplined, like say you're fasting or you're exercising, you're doing yoga, that's when you really feel good, isn't it? I mean, you really feel clean and pure when you're doing those things. When you don't do those things, is usually when we get off track. Like I've even talked to, especially guys, I think have an issue with the mind a little more than the females. And I talked to this one guy and he says, if I don't meditate daily, I'm just off, And I think that really goes for all of us. And self-mastery is us restraining ourselves in some way, which really means just guiding ourselves or reining ourselves in a particular direction. I meant to get this picture, but I'd forgotten. There's a picture in the Bhagavad Gita, or at least one translation of the Bhagavad Gita, which just means songs of God. And it's this guy in a chariot, and he's got 5 horses, and each of them one has the nose, the ears. Basically, the representation there, these 5 horses are 5 senses, and the soul is riding next to the person with the rein. So it's our job to rein in our 5 senses and guide our chariot, our soul, where we want to go, instead of being all over the place. It's a really cool picture. I'll have to make a note and see if I can find it.
It's too funny because I was going to say, when I ride, I don't have anything in my body.
Really? Mm-hmm. But you've been studying that Pirelli type of thing where it's all about getting in flow with the animal, which is interesting because it was like you talked about, remember that movie, what was it? Blue People? Avatar, yeah.
Blue People.
where they plugged into the horse and had that creature and had that connection. So our pain comes from when we're not in the moment, when we're thinking about the past or projecting into the future, and that restriction that we're keeping from being in the moment is what's causing our pain. And what's interesting, remember that I made that post in the Facebook today in the group that Beth was talking about earlier about the technology, where the technology's become another huge distraction. And one of the pictures that Beth was referring to in this woman is giving a talk. And about 12 years ago, she gave an entirely different talk because she was all about technology. But from her own experience, the main experience, I think her name was Sherry. Do I have it here? No. Yes, Turtle, something like that. And basically, she was talking about they'd actually engineered this robot to have like these caring, when somebody's talking to you, you go, yeah, and things like that. Well, this robot was programmed to give these responses. And I heard her on NPR this morning, and then I Googled her little YouTube. Thank you. Sherry Turkley. And it's called Connected But Alone. And one of the pictures is, and she said it was a picture of her daughter. Thank you, Tracy. It was a picture of her daughter where here's 3 girls. They're all looking in different directions. They're in the same room, and they're on their phones. And it wasn't like a posed picture. She just had snapped the picture. So it's like, it says connected but alone. Here we are in the same room, but no one's connected anymore. And the thing about it is that we're using technology to feel connected, but really what it is it's coming from a place of not feeling connected. So to me, I thought it was pretty interesting if you listen to that whole thing. I think that's where the technology is going to take us to, that realization that she's already had, is that it helps us in certain ways, and she's not saying get rid of technology, but if we're using it incorrectly, it becomes it's going to have to fall apart eventually.
She's saying just be aware.
Yeah, just to be aware, and not get lost into it. So here we are. I made this little shape here. So here everything is flowing. Here we have the flow, this little ripple in the ocean, oneness. And then yin and yang. Yin and yang are actually complementary forces. You could think of the yang being masculine or Adam, and then the feminine being Eve. And that's like Adam, which is particle, and Eve, which is time. So to me, and this is just me speaking, is that the Bible is actually, in Genesis especially, it's actually talking about basically the quantum physics aspect of creation. It's just done in a very poetic way. So Adam and Eve represent a particle and time, and how those two things make our reality. We got to have the two to work together. You got to have male and female. You got to have male and female for life to continue going on. So, but they're complementary forces, not fighting forces. So when we ate from the tree of good and bad, or the knowledge of good and bad, what that represented to me was when we took on judgment. Okay, when we took on judgment, God didn't kick us out of the Garden of Eden. We blinded ourselves to the garden we were in, because there's not like some special place on the planet, any special place on the planet that's like the Garden of Eden. It's the entire planet. Okay, we lost touch with that fact, or we hit blinders on once we took on judgment of others, judgment of whatever it is. Okay, and we're still walking around to this day judging everything, right? Even us that are trying to be aware and pushing ourselves, you can be honest about. I mean, think about this past week. How many judgments, how many arguments did you have over judgments? You know, it's time to drop that, which is what Jesus' example was, is there was non-judgment. That's what Jesus was trying to bring in, the concept that we need to take on non-judgment. And that is the most healing force in the world, because here we're one with everything, and we see the forces as being complementary. As soon as we take on judgment, they become opposing forces. So to get back to the flow and going with everything is you stop judging. That's why we hold on to things. Like we don't want something to happen because we're judging it's going to be bad. Like in a relationship. Sometimes, you know, like I've had a breakup, and I've seen lots of things around relationships that's crazy lately. I mean, lots of things are shifting and changing around relationships. I saw it beginning last year, and it's like sped up even this year. I'm seeing stuff all around me around relationship issues. But sometimes it's like you're in a relationship, you're like, oh, I don't want this to end. Well, maybe that holding and restriction is preventing something from happening that needs to happen, right? Instead of going with the flow. So our fears, our judgments, our perceptions are keeping us out of the now, which actually keeps us out of our connection to God. And then it just gets more and more bottlenecked. Then you start struggling with the flow, the Tao. Restriction of movement happens in the mind first, then emotionally, and then physically. So it's always mental restriction, then emotional restriction, then finally physical. Does that make sense? And my personal belief, and you don't have to believe in this, is that even comes into birth defects. Because in my perception, birth defects are an example of some kind of mental restriction in a bloodline that finally had to be manifested. Because when something manifests in quote unquote a disease or a birth defect, it can't be run from. You know, we all have issues, but we can spend an entire lifetime avoiding it, right? But once it becomes something very physical, then we have to address it. So here I have this picture of this guy cutting off the limb, but he's sitting on the limb, right? So that's kind of what we did. When we took on judgment, we're cutting ourselves off. We're not hurting anybody else, we're hurting ourselves. Anyway, I just want to bring that in. Holy is where we start bringing ourselves back together, back into the oneness, all that is, and we start realizing that these opposing forces apparently out there are really complementary forces. And this is like the bottom chakras and the upper chakras overlapping. If you take it a little bit further, it becomes the Star of David. So we have judgments, beliefs, which equal our restrictions. Okay, that's where most of our restrictions come from, are judgments, which are rooted in beliefs, and our beliefs are actually rooted in experiences and expectations. So it gets to be this big, long thing of really, to me, growth is not learning anything new. It's actually getting rid of what we've learned that was freaking wrong, right? A misperception that we took on from a family, a friend, society. Those are the things we're getting rid of. That's what needs to be healed. It's not about learning something new. So here, let's say that we're moving from, can y'all see that? Is it too small? I can blow it up here. Let's see if I don't lose it completely. I think I'm still recording that. You know, I know I've already gone over how the feng shui relates to the whole body. Let me do that a little bit, because Donna and Jim, I can't remember who else wasn't here last Thursday. But if you can, I'm going to bring this chart forward over here. I know I'm supposed to be talking about my digestion, but I feel like I want to do this tonight. Very good. Sorry, I can't see words. In a bigger room. So when we did Thursdays, we took this 9-sectioned area. You can lay in. Oh, okay. Good. Yeah. So we take them. You know, everybody here pretty much familiar with feng shui. The minimum anyway, the basics. The feng shui is basically means wind and water, and it means adjusting your house to by changing things in your home. You can change things that happen in your life. So there's 9 laws. The overall thing is called the Bog Law. It's usually in the shape of an octagon, but I like putting it there because it's more easily understood. So you have 9 aspects of your life: wealth, fame, relationships, children, creativity, heart. What's really interesting, if you go home tonight, if you look at where the center of your house is, whatever you find there is where your heart is mostly. Okay, it's interesting to go into somebody's house and see what's in their heart, because sometimes people's work desk will be there, and that'll be where their heart is.
Refrigerator, freezer. Maybe there's a door. That's in my art.
Yeah, well, that might be it though. Your art's hanging there, because sometimes it's just little bitty pictures or something like that. Health and family. You have self-cultivation. You have career, travel. So those are the outward expressions. And I've been this thing that's been coming to me recently is about immunity and community. Or immune system, and then finally this week something came around to help me see the bigger picture, because I was like, why is this getting my attention? Because what came to me is the immunity. The first part of that is I am unity. So it's like I got this part, but I was missing a bigger part. And then finally I was during the session and somebody said something about community, and I thought, oh, it's very similar. Immune and commune are very similar. Community, immunity. So what happens is, in this whole thing that we're in, like say this entire thing is God, and we're like a drop of water in the ocean, to be ourselves, we actually have to have a strong sense of self. A strong sense of self equals what? Your immunity. I am, right? So you got to have a strong sense of self, but yet go out into the world. So a lot of us people that are empathic, we usually suck here. Okay, we usually suck with having a strong sense of self. So we have a very hazy, little weak sense of self. Then the community can lead into that. But what I started playing with is all these bog walls may relate to something, out there, but they're also going to go back to self. Okay? So to have a strong immunity, to have a strong sense of self, that then can lead to a strong community, which is reflected in our reality. Why we're not having a strong community is because of this. Not because this first. Our weak community that we're seeing in the world, whether you look at countries and one another, because all that is about community, or just looking at your family, your friends, whatever, it comes back to self. So for wealth, if you don't have a strong sense of worth, the wealth is going to suck, right? Fame, you've got to have a nice self-image of yourself. Self-love in relationships, self-expression in creativity in children, self-help in wealth and family. Huh? Yeah. Self-aware is in self-cultivation. Self-care is in your career. Because if you think about it, when I wrote career, I was like, oh, the first part of career is care. Every career that we're in, whether it's somebody picking up the trash or whatever, they're taking care of something that needs to be done. Okay? If you want to have a good career that brings you what you need, you've got to be doing self-care also. Okay? I've screwed this up in my own career because it's like, I can pour way too much out. This is why I was up Laura's butt on Thursday, because I can see myself kind of doing the same thing I felt like she was doing, which was you can pour so much out, but if you're not filling yourself up, you're screwed, right? So self-care, in travel and helpful people, it's about self-discovery and being self-reliant. Okay? And then in the heart is yourself. So we got to come back to having a strong sense of self, being in the now, and then all the healthy community branches out from there. So all of our health issues, to me, relate back to something in this area here. Does that mean we're off in one of these areas? Which could then I haven't done this yet, but we could line these up with different astrology houses. And we can also line this up with different chakras. I just haven't done that part yet. Does that make sense?
Very good.
Or if that would be even to the body where, like your mouth would be like the front door, and then.
Yeah, there's a chart that actually does that.
Cool.
So you're right on. Yeah.
Not gonna happen.
What's my next magic trick? I make a mess of everything.
Pay no attention to me.
Yeah. The clumsy time.
Hero.
Okay, so we're on the same page there, right? So your job, your friends, your society, your relationship, your family, it's almost like if you're in a particular reality that you want to get out of, these things, if you don't have a strong sense of self, become things that chain you into it. Okay? So if you want to change, what happens is you're trying to move into something new, but you're tied to it. Okay? You're tied to the old way. And what's interesting about this, does anybody know what? Jim's ahead of me. This shape right here is what, Jim?
Pisces.
The Pisces symbol, okay? And because if you take off the sides, you see the fish. If you take off the sides in the circle, you get the fish. It's the Pisces. It's also because Jesus represented the feminine principle. It's also the womb, okay, right there. There's two legs, vagina. So when we come. So if we're trying to move into a new reality, and I talked about this before, this whole concept that God or Spirit tests us. In my perception, we're doing the test ourselves, because here we're creating from limited consciousness, and then we have a new awakening. We're trying to move into something new, so we're actually creating dualistically. We're creating from this way, like I got to work really hard to make money, and then you're like doing affirmations. I can make money easily, and when you fully have taken into this new level, you're creating from both levels. I mean, you're creating from both sides, so you wind up getting a mixture of reality, or you don't get 100% of the new reality. You get a limited reality because 50% still. Does that make sense?
Doubting yourself.
Yeah.
Well,
Go ahead, Don.
alcoholics explain how they their family is their biggest obstacle to change, because the family is used to a certain way of acting and reacting and
Enabling.
enabling. So when you get rid of your alcoholism and begin to change, they don't like it, and they don't know how to react with
Friends too. When I was in the military, in the military they say you're either going to be a metalhead, which is a guy that lifts a lot of weights, you're going to be a drunkard, or you're going to be a Bible thumper. I took the drunk way, so I drank a lot. And when I started stopping, when I stopped drinking, or I was in the process of not drinking, you actually start losing people that you used to hang around with. So you have to be willing to cut these strings. And if you're tied to, if you don't have a strong sense of self, thank you, Laura, because this helps me bridge it. If you don't have a strong sense of self, and you're more dependent upon the community side, like family and friends doing for me providing for me, other than me doing it for myself, then it's uncomfortable cutting those ties because you feel like you're losing something. You see what I'm saying? So, because when you start to change something, it's like birds of a feather flock together. If that's going to start changing, and it starts getting uncomfortable. And if it gets too uncomfortable, you may go back into that old pattern, just like what Laura said. Yeah, Don.
I was just counseling Friday my Australian client, and she sent me an email telling me all these things that she hadn't had a chance to do because she had to go and travel like 6 or 7 hours to be with her mother who's not well. So when we talked on the phone, I told her two things I want to coach you on. One is send me an email of what you have done, not what you haven't done. Because we want to stay in the positive, for
Good,
one.
yeah.
And for two is if you tell me what you have done, I can obviously see what you haven't done.
Right.
And then I was talking to her about having more realistic expectations, because she was trying to incorporate so much new things in her lifestyle. And I said, what you're living today, you set up in your mind 3 months ago. So
even further back.
Even further back,
Yeah.
yeah. And I said, you've got to play out all of that as well as integrate the new.
Right.
And so you're always going to be making like 3 steps forward and 2 steps backwards, or 1 step backwards and move forward. And it won't be probably for another 3 months until you'll really have this new stuff where you're doing it consistently. So just,
Yeah.
Do your best, but don't get on your case.
Right. You gotta be patient with yourself. It's almost
Right.
like it's that fine balance between being stern with yourself, like okay, it's like okay, I'm gonna eat right, or whatever you perceive that to be. So when you do that, there's the old part of you that's in the old way, so it's going to have the same cravings, and then you have the new way that you haven't moved into that's trying to do something. So you go back and forth. You can't kick yourself too hard for that. You still struggle, but don't beat yourself up. You know what I mean? And like Donna, it's that fine balance between okay, I'm going to try, but I'm not going to hate myself if I don't do it perfectly. Because if you start hating yourself, it's more likely you're going to wind up getting stuck in the negative.
Right.
So when we start shifting, you just have to ask yourself, like, what am I resisting? Like Bambi had brought out earlier with this, we talked about it a couple weeks ago, is the resistance is what causes our pain. And because imagine, see these lines as this person starts to move? If there were no lines, it would move easily, right? It would go without any effort. But life is not like that. So it takes a little bit of effort, but if we're willing to move with it, and we start addressing or taking away our resistance, then that speeds up. So like Donna was telling her client, you can push that, but we have techniques now that can lessen the pain of that. It helps us flow easier, right?
And you did a similar drawing to this a long time ago and said as you move, there are some that will break and stay in the ground. There are others that will come with you and reestablish in a new place.
Yeah, because with family and friends. Because it also goes the other way, like bad habits. Once you start drinking, you may lose family in moving into that new way of life. So sometimes friends are usually what we change the most, because family we tend to have to stay, right? You kind of say screw you, even though some people do. But family, friends. If you stop drinking, you're not going to be going to the same places that your old friends went to. And that's probably the hardest part of change, is if you don't have a strong sense of self and you're too dependent out there, then you're gonna fall right back, because you're gonna lose your balance. And I like this picture here. Actually, Laurie had sent me this picture. Go down more. It says the wound is the place where light enters you. I think that's really cool.
Wow.
Rumi. Yeah. So now we're going inside with all of this, and it goes inside just as well as it is outside. So I'm going to give you an example here. Oh, let me blow this back up, dang it. And this dovetails it perfectly into something else. So going inside, what I want y'all to get is that the mental emotional totally reflects the physical. Okay? So I try to write that way, even though it's sometimes hard to fully express that. So this is an effort here to express this. See how, first before I go into that, see how the chakra system is right here? You have the 3 upper chakras, which are feminine, and you have the 3 lower chakras that are masculine, and the heart's in the center. If you fold that perfectly, this brain here folds right over into this brain. And your intestines are actually what they call the enteric nervous system. 90% of your serotonin is produced here, not in your brain. So to me, it just shows another way of how these 2 aspects relate to one another. So if your gut's all jacked up and it's not digesting like it needs to, your brain isn't going to digest like it needs to. ADD, ADHD, things like that with children, autism, diet, one of the main things that will change that. Yeah, especially with intestinal inflammation. So once say you have a brain here, right, and you like the enteric nervous system. If you eat something and you inflame your brain, which equals irritation, it's going to go from that irritation go to here, and that's why kids get all agitated and irritated these days, is because of the foods they're eating or the allergies, the sensitivities to the environment. So let me give you an example of how the mind-body relates. I no longer have to, this is an affirmation, I no longer have to push and struggle. Push and struggle is gallbladder. Gallbladder pushes the toxins out of the body, okay? And it relates to the outside of the eye to get what I need. This is an affirmation to the contrary of this. This actually came up in a session. This person was thinking unconsciously. She wasn't saying this, but we uncovered it, right? I have to push and struggle to get what I need. Okay, does that make sense? So here she is saying in her mind, I have to push and struggle to get what I need. Well, the gallbladder, which is the one that pushes things, it was overactive in her because of the mental mind state. Does that make sense? Okay? So, and then the affirmation carries on. I no longer have to push and struggle, which is gallbladder, to get what I need because everything is okay. And so she had gallbladder pancreas issues. Being okay is about the pancreas. The pancreas is about taking the sweet things in life. and I have this chart, but I haven't finished making it completely. But there are certain like affirmations, like the pancreas is, you know, you want to hear that you're okay when you're a kid. Things are going to be okay. You're going to be fine. And when you don't feel like that, you cause irritation in that particular area. So another aspect that related to the pancreas here is something is wrong. So they learned through childhood that something is going to happen, something's wrong. I can't get what I need. So if this person is saying something's wrong and I can't get what I need, which basically isn't just something physical, it's also food, nutrients, and nurturing, then that's going to blow out the pancreas in this case. Does that make sense? So simply by saying I can't get what I need, you're blowing your pancreas out, whether that's in your unconscious or in your consciousness. And the cool thing about it relating to epigenetics, which means we can rewrite our DNA, is if you change the words, you change how those particular organs work. Does that make sense?
Totally.
So another affirmation here, I can relax, let go, and trust now. So that relates to the colon, which is all about letting go of the old crap. And if you have belief systems where you can't let go, you can't relax, and you can't trust, well, guess what? Your colon is going to be not working really good. Does that make sense? So I like this too. The body has to reflect it. So our body right now is reflecting our messed up consciousness and our positive consciousness. If you can own this part, which I'm really trying to own now, is that if I change my mind, the body has to reflect it, just like it's already reflecting my mind. Does that make sense? So it can be quicker. I'm trying to embody that thing where change can be quicker and quicker and quicker, right? So, for example, anger at eating people's emotional shit or crap equals inflammation and irritation in the colon. Does that make sense? Remember, the irritation is anger, right? Anger is liver, gallbladder, and they can cause inflammation in particular areas. So, for example, if somebody's angry at eating people's emotional shit all the time, which means they're not setting a healthy boundary, with solar plexus relates to the liver. I'm going to be throwing a bunch at you because the map is so overlaid that I can't. I've spent months trying to spell it all out for you. Okay, so I'm gonna have to start putting it together, and you'll have to kind of get the pieces. Does that make sense? So liver, and gallbladder right here with solar plexus. They're about getting rid of toxins. They're about setting boundaries. So if this person is angry because they're unable to set boundaries, that inflammation, which is going to show up in the liver, gallbladder, is going to cause colitis and things like that. Does that make sense? Okay, that's the reflection. So what we're going to do is I'm going to.
Last part, you under the colitis.
Sorry. What was that again?
Oh, the colitis part. Okay.
Yeah, that's just one example of what could be a result of that. If you've got a mental thing like I have to, so let's say this child, their parents were fighting all the time, and they were stuck in that environment. They might have adapted this thing where, you know, I have to eat this emotional shit even though I don't like it. So eventually you do that, anger builds up. Once the anger builds up, then the organs start to kick in and cause the other problems. Because if the liver is irritated overly, the liver is what produces the bile. The gallbladder holds the bile. So if you're producing way too much bile, that bile is actually what causes the peristalsis in your colon once it gets there. If you're producing a bunch of anger and bile all the time, bile, you see how those correlations? Then what happens is the colon's always going to be irritated because you're having to eat crap, colon, that you're angry about, eating that over and over. Does that make sense? So what I want you all to do is take a moment and let me shrink this back down. Take a moment and fill out your sheets that you have, even if you've already done that. Not that one. With the, yeah, we'll go over those other pictures at the end there too. So just take a moment and fill out the 3 pages on your mouth, the teeth, and if you've already done this, go ahead and do it again. Stomach, any kind of issues you're having around these areas. And then we're just going to take a short amount of time for this because the main way for you to learn is by example. So I'm going to try to give you some good examples instead of just trying to
I'll clean it.
Take one of everything.
So you got a page about mouth, the teeth, the throat, the esophagus, and the stomach.
What's real interesting about the line you drew and the tether,
The what?
like the line you drew with the tether coming out, because it was a recent video I watched that said the exact same thing from Ask Teal Scott. Her last video was exactly the same thing about lining up, and she had somebody there actually holding a line and talking about lining up with your higher self.
Cool.
And it was really cool. It was like when you're lined up with your higher self, you're enjoying. And then your higher self has, like, lack of better words, an agenda for you. It has like, okay, this is what you're going to do. So you pull yourself up. But when you're in anything but joy, then you're turned around and you're pulling the tension from that. It's pretty trying to get away or not lined up with your higher self, wherever that intention is. And then, so you're in joy up to that intention, and then you would almost stair step up. So then your higher self would go, oh, you reached this, cool, let's go to this. Let's go to this thing.
Try this out.
Let's try this out. So it extends it out, and then you're pulling back on.
I like that.
Enjoy.
So it's just a constant evolution.
Yeah.
Wow.
But it's pretty interesting because, like, anytime you experience anything but joy, then you're pulling away from
Right.
that. It was pretty cool.
Well, the image that pops in my head is if here's spirit pulling you. In order for you to pull it, what do you have to do? You have to like, stay. You have to stay where you are, right?
You have
To
to get
pull
grounded.
something, so it means
Right.
you're restricting where you are. You're not willing to move.
Yes. That's funny. I mean, it's like
Wow.
almost the same thing at the same time, coming from two different sources.
One thing that when I went through my divorce, one visualization that I did was I just envisioned all these lines that attach the two of us and hooks, and I would physically, remove the hooks from myself and let it go. And I did that for months.
Kind of like the human mobile.
Yeah,
Have you ever seen
it
those?
was like, we're totally disconnected from one another.
Through the hooks.
Everybody pretty good with that?
Yes.
I know. We're taking a short amount of time with that because you're gonna get it more if I show you. And we're gonna get like the class participation going. If you brought your pages, that's good. I have a couple of sets. There's one right there on that. And I've got together like 10 pages now in the overall thing. And it's like putting it all together, which takes quite a bit. The more you memorize it, the easier it is to put it all together. So, Katie, would you be willing to play a little bit with what you were talking about earlier?
Sure. Just tell me what you need.
Okay, so I'm going to try to show you all the picture. So you've got your little chart that shows the Chinese. Let me make this bigger here. See the Chinese clock here on the bottom right? Okay. It relates to the 12 meridians. You should have it. Oh. It's you. I saw it right. It's on the back of that. No. Okay. Oh, you got it right there. I guess I need to. It's going to be on the one with the gallbladder points, or some. And sometimes it's on the hand tapping one, where it actually has the chart. I had it in 2 different places before I kind of uniformed it, so there's not. You don't have one there. I'm going to blow this up to show you something. Thank you. Yeah, let me go back to that real quick. These are some drawings I've done around the different organs, and the only one you don't have in your packet is the small intestine. So the different organs relate to different aspects. So right here, on the upper left, is stomach. Okay, stomach is about stress is the main emotion there. Things like I've had enough, I'm stressed out. It relates to the left mind. It relates to Mercury. It relates to I can't take anymore. So here's the stomach holding its upper esophagus, which is causing what? What does that happen when you get that upper sphincter of your stomach? Acid reflux, right? And basically acid reflux. Here's one of the reflections here. Acid reflux is saying don't put any more shit down in me. But that's mental emotional before it's physical. Does that make sense? When somebody has acid reflux or anything relating to the esophagus, is it saying literally I've had enough. Don't give me any more shit. Does that make sense? Okay. So it also relates to worry, anxiety. You know, you always hear about the aspect of butterflies in your stomach. Basically, when you have that feeling of butterflies in your stomach, it's the energy around the stomach being short-circuited. It relates to the 3rd house in in astrology, and it relates to 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. on your Chinese clock. Also, concepts like you make me sick. And it also relates to Gemini. The spleen, which is the stomach's partner, is always keeping things clean. It governs the lymphatic system. It's tied into Cancer as its little pet here, the crab. And it's got a little moon on its necklace representing Cancer's in charge of the emotions, right? The moon, the chest. And it also helps you pull nutrients out of your food as well as keep your system clean. Most of us in this room would tend to be more spleeny than anything. We're very empathic. We feel too much. We tend to be sometimes overly sensitive. Relates to the 4th house, which is family, and at 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. is the time period. The next one that y'all don't have, because I just drew this one earlier today, is the small intestine. The small intestine, let me blow this up a little more. The small intestine relates to, for one thing, the stomach goes right into the small intestine.
It's kind of not it.
Yeah. Sorry. I'm trying to record this at the same time can be a little hazardous. Can't even talk. Okay, I'm almost there. Wrong way. So it ties into the stomach right here, relates to Mercury. Again, it's a mental thing. Tied in knots. I'm tied in knots. I can't decide yes or no. Remember, small intestine's about deciding. This way or that side or this side. It joins into the colon. So it also ties into being overly analytical. Ties into the 6th house of health, and it relates to 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. And basically the small intestine is where you absorb probably most of your nutrients. You absorb some things in your colon like minerals, but most of your nutrients are absorbed in your small intestine. So these are the things that you need to go into your body, into your bloodstream. That's why small intestine and heart are considered brother and sister in Chinese medicine. What you absorb needs to go to your blood, which then gets to everybody, right? To the blood system. The liver, I drew that liver pretty evil, but it's really not evil. We've got to have, when we don't have a strong liver is when we get in trouble. The liver I drew like a shark on purpose. It relates to the emotion anger. It relates to Pisces, the 12th house. The gallbladder, see its little thing hanging with it? Let me blow this up a little bit. So this little thing hanging on the liver is the gallbladder, and it's holding a sign yes and no. So gallbladder deals with discernment. It also deals with Aquarius. That's why you have the Aquarius symbol on the gallbladder. It's associated with the wood element. It's also associated with Neptune, and it's 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. So these are just part of the organs associated with digestion. So we're going to pull this in a different way with Katie. I know I said a lot just then, but hang with me.
When was Gemini?
Huh?
No, Cancer.
Cancer.
So the
See the little crab?
stomach is Gemini? You said something?
Yes, that's good.
Thank you.
Do what? Go
No,
ahead.
we got it.
Okay. Where I went? Okay, right there. So now I'm going to take this, what I've said a little bit. I know I've said vaguely. See, the thing about that is it's impossible for me to lay everything up in one session. If you've been coming and getting all these little bits and pieces along the way, this is going to make a lot more sense. I can't stop it at this point and draw the whole picture for you. That's what some of these sheets are to help you do, to find the whole picture. So with Katie, what she experienced is she has a sleeping pattern where she almost always wakes up between what time?
1 and 3 a.m.
1 and 3 a.m. Look on your Chinese clock for those of you that have it. And what time is that?
Liver.
Liver, okay? And liver does what? On a physical level. What does it do on a physical level? Huh? It filters. It gets rid of, helps get rid of toxins. It's also one of the main.
It stores carbohydrates or glucose until the body needs
Yeah,
it.
for energy production. One of its main functions is also hormone conversion. So it has lots of different things. It has a lot of movement in the body. Okay, it relates to movement, and the main thing is it helps to filter and get rid of toxins. And another thing that came up recently is Katie said she crashes at a particular time of day. So at night when she should be sleeping, she's up. Okay? And when during the day, there's a time she crashes when she should be up. And what time do you crash?
Between 2 and 3 p.m.
2 and 3 p.m. Okay? 2 and 3 p.m. falls within 1 and 3 p.m., which is small intestine. If you look at the Chinese clock, they're opposite of each other, right? Okay? So liver up here you can see the black, which is yin. Liver is yin, small intestine is yang. Their energy is flip-flopped because yin is like, sleeping at night. It's got the night sky with the moon, and the yang, which the small intestine should be, is like the night, like the daytime and the sun. So these two energies are switched. But why are they switched? Small intestine deals with what mostly?
Discernment?
On a physical level, on a mental, emotional level, it's discernment, and it deals with absorption, getting things from your food. So your small intestine is like, this is good for me, this is bad for me. What's bad for me gets pushed to the colon, and you get rid of it like waste. Does that make sense? Okay. So if you have poor discernment, you're not going to absorb what you need, or you're going to be absorbing the wrong things. Does that make sense? Okay. So she's got a struggle between her liver and small intestine that's showing up. Okay. Does that make sense so far? Just how you see. So now we're bringing in time frame, how the time frame fits into it all. So we've got she's the main complaint to where we started from is she's waking up almost every night at a particular time period, and then another time period during the day she crashes. They just happen to be opposite of one another. To me, that's a good example of how everything reflects. So we're going to look at this on a deeper level. So Katie, you want to lay on the table?
You want to shut them up?
Sure.
No one's okay.
Okay.
Are they going to make I'll get up? And you down. Okay.